So happy to be here at New West. My name is Joyce Cenali. I work with a group called Big Rock Partners, and we've just been so blessed to have a great relationship with Jim and Kat and the whole team here. So I'm super privileged to introduce this great panel. So we're going to start with some introductions. Mary Bailey to my left from Last Prisoner Project. You want to get us started?
Sure. Hi, guys. I'm Mary, and I'm the managing director of Last Prisoner Project. Basically, we're working to get cannabis prisoners released and also create reentry programs, which includes vocational training and workforce placement. We also are really focused on creating awareness campaigns. A lot of people in America have no idea that there's 40,000 people still in prison for cannabis, and that's an issue. So we're working together to fix that issue.
Awesome. My name is Kaliko Castille. I'm the head of growth for the National Cannabis Industry Association. So I oversee the sales, marketing, and partnerships department. I also serve as the vice president of the Minority Cannabis Business Association, was just recently elected to that position. So just really trying to do the best I can to help move this movement forward at NCIA for the broader industry, trying to have a collective voice at the federal level, and then obviously through MCBA, helping to get entrepreneurs of color involved in this industry and ultimately helping to repair the harm from the war on drugs.
Hi. My name is Roz McCarthy, and I'm the founder and the CEO of Minorities for Medical Marijuana. We're based out of Florida. That's where our corporate office is. We have 27 chapters throughout the country. We have a chapter in the UK, in Toronto, as well as in Jamaica. Our 4 areas of focus is always going to be about social justice, social equity, making sure there's good public policy that's written at the state level, as well as health as wellness. We want to educate our communities of color. This is the community I grew up in. The individuals that are in prison are my cousins, they're my uncles. These are folks that really deserve an opportunity to see the legalized side of this plant. So I'm so happy to be here.
Hi, my name is Melek Dexter of ReUP. And we're a privately held company that leverages the Jobs Act to help black people to enter as owners into the cannabis industry.
Awesome. So this is actually probably the most important conversation that we can have in this industry. Obviously, Mary alluded to a really important fact, which is that 40,000 people today remain incarcerated. And we live out here in a bubble, or myself, I live out here in a bubble, and I wasn't aware until doing research for this panel that the last 3 years for drug-related causes, marijuana continues to go up every single year. 2018, 668,000 people were arrested for cannabis drug offenses, and in fact, in the Northeast, NORML just put out a study that 53% of drug-related incarcerated people were because of cannabis. So we're making strides out here in California. We need to do better, but the East Coast is still well behind us. Meanwhile, in terms of the rise of conscious consumerism, you have a real impact in terms of how you can actually associate your products to the total addressable market. Couple of quotes. McKinsey found that companies in the top quartile for diversity are 35% more likely to show financial returns. Boston Consulting Group, 2018 study, 19% increase in annual corporate revenues when you focus on diverse industries or diverse demographics in your consumerism. And Nielsen poll recently found that shoppers are 55% more likely if they're to buy your product if it has a social and environmental impact. So from an advocacy perspective, there's both reasons why we should do this that are better for our businesses and reasons why that are better for our communities. So I wanted to start by talking a little bit about the current state of equity programs and practices within our industry. So in terms of certain best practices that could be drawn out of what we're seeing in markets like Oakland and San Francisco and Los Angeles that are putting forward strong projects, could you guys comment on some of the things that you're seeing that you like, that are positive?
Well, I just had a conversation about this yesterday with a gentleman that's here in the audience, and so shout out to him and the work he's doing. And I will say that the conversation about social equity, I have the opportunity of covering the whole entire country and going global. So the conversation about social equity, educating our Black caucus leaders, because it starts with those people that represent our communities, and they're normally Black caucus government leaders, legislators. If it were not for San Francisco, Los Angeles, and Oakland to even begin it, it's not a perfect model. I have some issues with it. However, if you didn't start that conversation, right now we wouldn't have states like Pennsylvania, Georgia, New York, New Jersey, even thinking about what does social equity mean and how do we make sure that we execute and enforce what's put into the law. That's what my concern is. So from my point of view, I'm grateful that we have a starting point. Now it's about the enforcement and the execution of where we started.
Well, what I like to say is what I'm witnessing is the conversation is structured wrong. So it can only end the way that, what we've always seen things in, as what I like to call another segregation story. Although I'm grateful that there is a starting point, but I think the wrong people are in the room having the conversation. And so the conversation needs to be more structured around, instead of bringing the underground to the above ground, the underground has to come to the middle ground, all right? And then the above ground has to come to the middle also and have this conversation that's around real repair. If you hit me, I get to say, where I hurt. And if you're not willing to repair me at where my actual wounds are, then it's not gonna repair it. So I think it's a more human conversation that's not being had, and it's being had around X's and O's, and that's why marijuana is becoming big marijuana, like big tobacco. So I would like to see a different type of conversation, and we may have to put a few people out of the room who don't have the ability or the wherewithal to have those conversations.
I think I also agree that it's great that the conversation is starting and that it's great to have a starting point. In the conversations I've been listening to over my time in over the last couple of years, learning more about the equity issue, it seems to me that it's part of the structural problem is that we are leaving these up to localities and municipalities to create these systems when it doesn't operate in a vacuum. It doesn't operate in a silo. It ultimately is the entire market. So it does, the conversation does need to broaden out to what does a state level program look like? What does actual funding for these programs look like? And eventually that conversation is going to be leading up to the federal level as well. But I think that we are kind of, in some ways, leaving these municipalities out to dry and just try to eke it out on their own rather than providing the resources that they ultimately need to function.
And just know there's a difference between social equity and social justice issues, and they touch point in certain places, but there are different things that have to be addressed. And so I just want to make sure that's for the audience, because we throw around these terminology. We're seeing a lot of the big corporations coming out with their social equity plan. I have an issue with that because you have a social equity plan, but the inside of your organization looks vanilla. And I'm not women, veteran, it's just, so again, I think there's a lot of buzzwords, and my friend over here, I'm with you in regards to understanding, what are we talking about? Does it make sense of what we're talking about in that middle ground? I just got back from Jamaica, and there is a disconnect between the Rastafarian and the corporations who are wanting to come into their land. And it was so sad, and it made my heart full because they're so passionate. They've been working 30 or 40 years to legalize this plant. When we think about cannabis, we think about marijuana, we think about ganja, we think about what country? Jamaica. And they are just dying on a vine. There's a few they're getting through, but there's so many that are not. And so we do need to have a conversation where the corporations are, let me meet you here, the folks that are here, let me come up to here, and let's figure out how do we do the dance together. So,
and even on that note, the concept of economic empowerment has to become a social justice issue, or else it's just an empty program, again, that sounds good. Because as you mentioned, when you look at the executive boards of a lot of these businesses, the concept of people of color simply means that we have postured some people for what appears to be like a photo op. And so they've satisfied that, well, we have people of color, so now we are diverse. And I just feel we have to diversify the idea of diversification and it has to include economics and a disruption of the way power is distributed. But that's not going to come from the powers that be. That has to come from the powers that are.
That's right. And the disruptors who are
Yes.
on this panel to say, how can we hold folks accountable?
That's it.
That's actually, I wanted to touch on that too, and accountability. I feel like, states and counties are starting to pass these social equity policies, but I've heard that things are not quite going as well in certain zones as we would like to see them. And so I do feel like a certain level of accountability needs to be created to make sure that it's all happening the way that, when we created the policies, it's taking place.
So we're kind of running the line between policy conversation and private corporations and kind of how they're structuring their businesses. So, and obviously the policy is trying to forward into the private industry, but what are some concrete examples? So I want to allude to the Last Prisoner Project and ReUP. In terms of the corporate responsibility, both in terms of, supporting advocacy programs and in terms of their own internal hiring practices. Mary, do you want to sort of chat on how you guys have, kind of worked with corporations to get them involved in the movement?
Yeah, we've definitely, over the last 6 months of our organization, we've reached out to different cannabis industry leaders and, explained to them that because this is a booming industry, it is really important for them to give back and help us get these cannabis prisoners released. There are 40,000 people still in prison for an industry that is actually, supposedly booming. And it's definitely taken work. Certain companies have been really supportive. Cannacraft has been amazing. Harborside stepped up. Kaliko has been great. But, it's work. And Harvest has actually come on board as our partner, the dispensary chain, and they are funding our reentry program, which is huge. So there are certain companies and more are coming on board, but it takes being diligent and it's not easy to get people to come on board. I will say that.
Yeah, in terms of that, I'm also kind of, wondering, we're sitting right next to the Salesforce, tower, which I think Benioff has started, right, One for the Planet, and he gives 10% back. Like, I haven't yet seen that within any of our organizations. Like, there's a few commitments towards it. I had some examples, obviously. Jetty's done great with their Cannabis for Good, focused on bringing compassion programs back. Bloom Farms, 1 for 1 meal donation program. Ease recently launched Momentum, which is going to give a $50,000 grant to a bunch of different companies. So those are some examples, but industry-wide, it still doesn't exist yet.
So I'm going to take the niceness off a little bit because
Fair enough.
And I'm just going to be honest with you because this is the work we do every single day. There's people out here that do this work that a part of the give back or a part of going after that funding is that we need folks to understand that the folks that are asking for the funding, that are actually using the funding to go back into the communities that need it, and that they want to see people that look like them, that represent them in doing the things that they're doing in their communities, at their church, talking to their legislators, because if you don't see, there is something about relationship and trust. So no matter what you put together, no matter what the gist of what you put together, if that community doesn't have trust and trust that you have their best interests at hand, you raise money, but again, is it going to go back to where it needs to go back? And so, like, I think the corporations who are like, the one-offs and like, okay, I'm done. Well, how are you holding us accountable that if you're giving funding to? Now, I haven't been like Mary where I've been successful, to be honest with you. I can't get those callbacks, to be honest with you, and I'm just being frank. The corporations, and you can quantifiably go on our website and see the people that we're touching, but it doesn't stop. But how do we have one MSO right now that we're talking to that we're saying, listen, create a fund, create resources, put it in your budget. So when you do your top line budget for your marketing budget and all this stuff, create that budget so that every time we need something, I don't have to go back to you and say, please, sir, can I get $500? have someone that is allocated to oversee that budget so that we can do the work, because it's not just M for MM. There's local people at the local side who are inviting us to come in to talk about cannabis relief or talk about social equity, and they need that support as well. And I think that's where the re-engagement of those dollars, those tax dollars, and also corporation dollars from a social responsibility aspect.
Yeah, and I'd like to add to that. I just would like for everyone to consider, first of all, shout out to the People's Dispensary. That's my crew there, you know.
It was coming, but you got it first.
So I want you to think about the concept of a child, a black child, a child who cannot understand that someone is on the cover of a magazine doing the same thing that someone, their parent, is in jail for. See, children they're not consequence, you know, the ability to articulate it is different, right? But it doesn't mean that it doesn't create the confusion. So what often happens in these situations about, you know, asking for corporate responsibility, number one, I don't believe that I don't even like the concept of corporate responsibility. It has to be people responsibility. What's to stop a company from doing what it always does? Nothing, except that the right conversations bring the right audience, and in that audience, you know, there's an exchange. That's why what we do with ReUP is we endeavor to be our own social equity program. And then from us being our own social equity program, then everyone above can watch how we do it. And there's just something about success that you just can't argue with, especially when it's self-made. All of the major industries, we look at hip-hop, a lot of these things are self-made. Then later on, it's appropriated. The marijuana industry is the same thing. It's no different. What has to happen, again, the bottom has to stop being the bottom and has to be what it is, the roots, and we become our own program in the way we sustain ourselves. There's laws that we can actually come together and unify and pool our resources and do what needs to be done. And I think that's the example that we'll teach the top. So we lead from the back, so to speak.
And I think there's something to be said that there's still a lot of education to be done. It's like, it goes without saying for a lot of us in these rooms that, like, you know, that we just lived through an injustice of decades, that this was an extension of white supremacy, that this was an extension of Jim Crow. But there are a lot of people in this world that still don't understand that, right? And whether you're talking about legislators and regulators who don't quite grasp that concept and who also have been bought into the idea of, you know, reefer madness over the last, like, you know, decades, they've been taught to inherently not understand this issue. So we're basically asking them to understand both marijuana legalization and then these social impacts of that in a very short window. So I do think there's a lot more that, you know, obviously NCIA, other industry organizations, other advocacy groups can do to continue to educate people, because even though we continue to come to these events and it sinks in for us, there are just a lot of people out there who don't understand those basics. So we do need to do more education, and that includes with companies as well. If you're getting into this industry because you're seeing headlines about the green rush and you're just seeing dollar signs and you don't understand that this industry is inherently political and that it comes from decades of struggle, then you're just not, like, going to come with the value set that we need in order to make this a sustainable industry. So, you know, at NCIA, obviously, one of the things that we've started is we just launched a Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee, which is member-led. So those are NCIA members who are coming together to figure out what can we do within our organization to act as a fulcrum for other organizations and other companies that want to be a more inclusive place and do their part. But I think education is just still very much key. We're still, you know, having these panels, having these discussions, especially at events where investment is so heavily focused on, where so much of the business aspect is talked about. If we're not having these conversations, then the people who need to be educated, who are at those tables that you were talking about earlier, they're just not going to have that information that they need to actually empower anything.
I agree. I feel like the stories need to be shared. We actually had one of our clients who served 4 years for a cannabis offense, and we had her do a speech in front of a room full of investors a couple nights ago, and it was so dynamic. I mean, we had tears. She made us laugh. She made us cry, and she, you know, it really hit home to these people who had no idea what's really happening. And so again, I agree, awareness campaigns are everything, not only for the industry, but just everyday Americans who have no idea what's really going on within the industry.
I would like to say this, slightly pushing back. The idea of this education and literacy, it assumes that there is illiteracy. It's not, I don't think it's an issue of illiteracy. I think it's apathy. And that's what runs, that's what business is. Business is X's and O's. It's a machine. You know, it's a cantankerous beast that must be fed. And so it just so happens that business creates a vulnerable population that will be eaten. And that vulnerable population is what we're trying to have this conversation about. And so I would like to see us, you know, kind of push away from this. Let's quantify and validate this idea of who needs to be educated. Because, for example, when you consider like 80% of the marijuana that was grown in California left California, all right? And I said this the other night, that if you look at the statistics, you just read them, black people are 5 times more likely to be arrested with marijuana than anyone, right? Well, there's a way to flip that from a business standpoint, all right? So if we went through this room and every black person in this room had weed, it just simply means black people got weed, right? Instead of, you know, focusing on the social justice aspect of discrimination. So what's happening with the legalization process? In effect, legalization is creating a Walmart effect. It's literally gentrifying the routes, sophisticated routes that black and brown people have had in this country because we got weed. And the literacy aspect is that we actually have been running the weed business, you know, but it's been called a game. And so this is what my revelation was, is that I realized that I was in the game and Homeboy was in the business. I was selling weed and he was selling cannabis, you know? And so that awakening is what we have to do. That's not a matter of literacy. That's reminding you that, hey, you were running this shit. Can I curse in here? Okay. It's not like we can rewind it, right? So we were running it, and that's what needs to be said, because the Walmart effect comes into a play, and then you look up, and now you know what Walmart does. It comes and it kills all the mom and pop businesses. So that's what legalization is doing, and so to me, that's the conversation that has to be had, because the big conversation, the big suits and ties, they're not going to have that. So I appreciate for you bringing that person in that room and having that conversation, but it's not a matter of education. I think they are illiterate, but I also think that we need to do, you know, a check to see what's beating inside their chest.
And making that commitment from the top to the bottom in regards to connecting to those individuals who, if they were running the game before, and if we are in the most complex, highly compliance-driven industry I've seen in my lifetime. So with that being said, there's different entry points. So our goal up here collectively, as you talk about ReUP and going down the line, is how do we give people understanding of where your entry point is? And all entry points are not going to be the same. But in order to have an entry point, I need a receptor, and that receptor is native roots. That receptor is True Leaf. That receptor, they're not the only receptors, but when you make, you know, when you're doing $50 million in a quarter and you're doing licensing deals with these other folks, well, I got someone that got a joint weed juice. She wants a licensing deal. So that's where, from my commitment and as a leader in the organization, I'm trying to connect those dots. So I don't want folks to say, well, I want to bring black folks in, or I want to bring people of color, I can't find them. Well, we got them. They're out here. So we got to connect those dots. And I think it's really, we have to show execution and show outcomes. And so we have this conversation, but in this room right now, think about who can you affect. Look at everybody on this panel, find a friend up here and say, I want to connect with you. I look at my circle, and how can I help move this further and move this conversation? Because I do get a little frustrated coming up and we have the panel discussion, but we have to have some type of outcome and some type of execution, in my opinion.
For sure. Just if I can add one quick thing, because I agree with you on the apathy definitely playing into it. And so like one of the things that we're working on with our diversity, equity, inclusion plan is part of that, really laying out the business case for people why being a more inclusive organization or having a more diverse workforce will make you a better business. I know that's stuff that you were mentioning too. Good.
Yeah, but we do that now. We do that with Coca-Cola United. We
Sure,
do
that's
that. And I think sometimes the attitude is here is like, it's kind of like I'm doing my thing, but it's a great talk, it's a great talking point, but I'm talking about action and outcomes. So if you're writing a social equity plan, if you're in a cannabis organization, only if you're writing a plan, what are you doing to execute that at the ground level? And so I think we talk about the diversity of the numbers, and we talk about it brings productivity and it brings more. But right now we're in such a young industry that we can't quantifiably go back and say, you did this for diversity, and this is what you got in your return on investment. Because right now, there's not a lot of B2C business going on because we don't have interstate commerce. You have business in California, you got businesses trying to start up in Oklahoma, in Missouri, and so you don't have the ability to measure the actual force that's being taken when you talk about from a diversity standpoint. So I think sometimes if you have that conversation, not to say that if you do, but I think it's like, oh yeah, we know that. And I just believe that, at this point, there has to be some executives at that level that, I call it, we talk about compassionate heart, they really take this a little more serious and look at how do we execute and how do we have some outcomes that we can, even the outcomes can be here, but let's have something that we can measure.
Yeah, so on that, a couple of statistics. I've got a lot of them for y'all. 19% of businesses own cannabis businesses nationally are owned by people of color. 23% of those in California. So we're doing a little bit better out here. And a shout out to People's Dispensary again. I think SF Roots is around, and if anybody wants to call out some of their favorite businesses. And then VC, and I happen to work for one of them. We've done a little bit better job supporting female founders and people of color, but 2.2% of VC dollars went to women founders in 2018, and 1% of those were females of color. So this is where it all starts. So what are some steps that we can take to change that? I see some journalists in the room, so I got one comment, which is we start utilizing imagery and headlines that are, not just a big bong toke, and let's focus on the medicinal side of it. Let's focus on different people in those. But what are some other things that you guys got for us?
I noticed that. On the West Coast, of course, because this is where hip-hop and cannabis, seem to have been able to be, because it was legal here first. Yeah. All right? So I would like to see the individuals in the audience and us press I would say the rappers is mostly how I see it, is that the issue around that is it's almost as though black people, brown people, interact with marijuana in caricature. We interact with marijuana from a musical standpoint, from an entertainment standpoint, in the legal marijuana as though it's legal. It's always about how high we can get or how bomb the weed was or sticky or something to that effect. Where are the rappers who are talking about the science of it, the healing of it, instead of just getting busted out of your head about it? So, it's still like we're operating in caricature. It's the Sambo version of legal marijuana. And so I would like to see us put another kind of pressure, another kind of requirement, on that particular aspect so that we can talk different, as well as, if there's any rappers in the audience, to stop signing these agreements, to get a check with these big companies so they can sell their pens or whatever. Get some equity, and then, also join one of these other groups that are up and coming in the cannabis industry and throw your celebrity behind that.
So on that, how do you feel about Jay-Z's alliance with Kaliko?
Yeah. I mean,
they don't have a single person of color on their executive team, so it was a little surprising to me.
No, well, I think with him joining, I'm very optimistic and supportive of the brother because I think that his background and what I've seen recently in the last 7 years having been very, very strong from a social justice standpoint. So I think that, the journey of 1,000 steps starts with one, and I'm supportive of the fact that he took that step, and I'm certain that more people will move because he's an influencer.
We would just like to see, if you are giving that influence and that notoriety to one, that you go and look out for maybe others. We know, and they must know by this point, and if they don't know, maybe we need to do a better job of educating. There's social equity programs, there's social equity applicants that are out here. How nice would it be if they go and search out for those individuals, or go ask where those individuals are, and be able to use your celebrityism to support them. So I think, going back to your question about the VC, we just did an interview with the Cannabis News Investor Network, and I went to the ArcView event that was in New York City. Those places, they don't see people of color that have a business. We're not pitching in front of them. So until we have angel investors within our own confines, and we have folks, but that VC market that you want to understand, why is it only 1%? Well, if you don't get introduction to those businesses, then how are they going to find us? And so that is another opportunity for the ArcViews, the New Frontier, all the different VC groups. What's your commitment to the social? So it doesn't start with just the cannabis corporations. It's everybody within the whole realm in the whole industry. What's your commitment? And they're running their organizations. They see what's going on. They see who is getting funded. It's not like it's not black businesses out here and brown businesses who need funding. And I'm talking about reputable, credible, doing the damn thing businesses, not touching plant, but they're awesome. And if they need some coaching, if they need some support, then let's give them that. But if they were to get that funding, and let me tell you something, we as black folks, we'll take this much and stretch it out for so long and deliver like you ain't never seen before. We don't need a whole lot. You just give us a little bit. And honestly, and it's sad, because this is the way it's been all of our lives. It's been all of my life. I don't need a lot. Just give me an inch and watch how I work it out. And that needs to be communicated and shared, so that these VCs give us an opportunity to get these businesses in front of them, and then maybe we'll see an increase in that percentage.
I'd like to say this, and I think like projects like, Mary's and Kiko's and Roz, that the way these, events we should try the event, host to set up where the audience are the bigger companies, and then they have the opportunity to hear, and then let's in that room while we're together, let's see who's going to step up, because what you're doing is a powerful thing, Mary and Kiko and Roz. So what needs to happen is that while we're in the presence, let's have that real conversation and see who bites.
One idea that I've had, and we've talked about it quite a bit, is creating mentorship programs. And so, these VCs, and so, these people of color that are entrepreneurs, like you're saying, they need introductions. They need someone that's deep in the industry and funding these huge projects to just give them some time, and to coach them and to give them introductions, get to know them, give them advice. So that is one suggestion that I have to the industry that's wanting to have representation of a social equity. Mentorship programs are very, very important.
A little bit outside of the investment side, I know there's some folks in the audience who are doing really great work to try to basically create a symbol for social equity businesses, so that businesses that are trying to meet their requirements for supplier diversity are able to find these businesses. I think the similar thing could be useful for the investment side. Is there's always this excuse, well, we can't find black-owned businesses to carry on our shop. Well, if you create that list and create that platform and then put it in front of their face, there's no more excuses, right? So I know that is something that Nina and other folks here in the room are doing a really great job to work on, and I do think that that's going to be a monumental step forward for people to be able to actually identify who's supporting those black and brown businesses.
I want to say this also on that, and I think this is a different kind of twist as well. I would like to see that we are no longer asking, because it sounds like a real diplomatic way, not a diplomatic, but it sounds like the pitch is kind of like a beg. And it's not ego, but that's kind of, play, help us, please help us, please, it's hat in hand, it's kind of played. I would say this is the way that thing should flow, right? Is that if you in the audience, you want to do the right thing and be on the right side of history, do the right thing. You know, and if you in the audience understand, if you don't want to be a consumer forever, then you come and you do what's necessary with the groups that's up here on the stage, and you find who is looking to empower people without going through the bureaucracy, which in my opinion is set to do what it always does. You know, go directly to those individuals and you pledge your support. One thing, I guess it's kind of like a shameless plug, but what we set out to do is raise $50 million to actually invest as ourselves, as our authentic selves into the business and take our portion out and do what we do, which is run our business. And so those are the kind of things when you're in the audience, I would say if you feel that, then you do that. Other than that, you know, these type of conferences can keep happening and we're asking individuals to do things, and maybe because we're polysyllabic on the stage, it just sounds better, but it's really just a professional bag.
Yeah, so, I mean, hopefully years from now, I mean, if the tapestry of the products and business owners can actually represent the demographic that they're trying to attract, hopefully we won't have to have panels like this in the future. So I think that's the goal, right? That's the goal. As a gay person, that was my goal coming out a long time ago. So I wanted to open it up for questions. I think we got some great concrete actions that folks can take. One of the things I just wanted to share is the United Nations has sustainable development goals. Every single Fortune 500 company puts them on every single quarterly report that they ever do. We as an industry can take that precursor and build that, and you know, to the point of what Kaliko was alluding to, you know, that should be a part of it. And I think that's a really clear call to action that, you know, we could all come together on in this conference and otherwise. So a little time for questions, y'all. Come on now, somebody's got a question.
Hi, I have a question. Hi, my name is Jessica. I'm from New Era. And I wanted to start with just something that I hadn't heard. I'm Asian American, and something that we don't talk about or haven't noticed yet is that the Asian market is still in a very different place. And it is because of U.S. colonization. And the fear and the stigma is still very, very real, and there are still people who are spending years in jail. And one thing I want to say is just applaud this group and just share my gratitude, because I think that we are doing something that a group of humans have not yet done to this point, which is look past our differences and come together. And as a market is emerging, we're getting together and we're having the difficult conversations about what it took for us to get here and what it's going to take to move us forward, and like sorting through that emotional pain and then trying to put some sort of economic system in place in order to move through it. And I'm wondering in this process, what are some of the conversations that we're maybe not having, or in an ideal world as exemplars of people who are really influencing an emerging industry and having meta conversations about who has power and why, and how we direct that energy to really change the tides of forces of like economy and colonization. I don't know if that made sense.
So a little bit, but I will tell you one of the conversations that I think that I think is important is the medical aspect of this plant and the education in our communities of color. So the challenges that you face in Asian community and our Black, our African American communities, our Latina communities, talking to our elders, it's not even our elders, it's the next level down. It's people behind the curtain who want to learn more. I think we have a responsibility in regards to this plant, the science of this plant. When someone says, I consume and it makes me feel better, that means there is some medical efficacy, or there is some type of a correlation between healthcare and wellness that we need to have a conversation about the delivery system. And also, you can talk about the economics. It's critical for me. I have a son who has sickle cell, and my mom passed away from breast cancer. So that's why I started the organization, because I want to have a very severe, very hyper-focused towards medical, because my community, you have folks that consume, and they know what they want, they know how they want it, or what have you. But there's a bigger population, and big corporations, hear me good, the bigger population that they don't know you, and when when prohibition is lifted at a federal level, and now everybody gets to play in the same sandbox, the consumers that you want, black and brown folks, we spend money. We're looking for options for healthcare. We're going to be your consumer, and we are brand loyal, and we believe in if you support me, I support you. So I do think there has to be a conversation about health and wellness, and even more in depth, in my opinion.
I want to add to that for you is that every culture deserves to own its own culture. And so, one suggestion is that you all should fractionalize the asset that is your culture. I think the Asian community has done well with that, throughout the different places where you all are in a stronger population. So in fractionalizing the asset that is your culture, then the investment can be fractionalized also, and therefore it's affordable. So that's how I would say, to proceed and to roll out, the ability to be in power in legal cannabis.
I met someone, her name is, I don't know if she's here, but she has she's another Asian American sister, Sweet, and her company is Grass to Grass, or Grass by Grass. Thank you.
Yeah, they're
Thank
doing
you.
a great job. And it's actually really interesting. Shintoism in Japanese culture that has a use of cannabis leaves that have been traced up to 5,000 years, like forever ago, the original human group, and traces up to 7%. So that do create pretty substantial biological difference in the body. And when I actually went to the Japanese American community, I was told by a man in his 30s who's an accountant that I had to take this information out, that it was offensive to educate them about this history, because there was just this weird thing. So I just wanted to highlight that is still super real. What I don't realize as a millennial is the negative impacts of propaganda and of older generations. It's still very present for them.
In several communities, but we can learn a lot from the history of the plant as it relates to your community, and be able to pass it and share it. Thanks.
I think we got time for one more. Oh, two more. Can't miss Sue.
Well, so maybe I'll use the mic. My question was about how much of a responsibility to ensure that the industry stays diverse do you guys feel should be the responsibility of the consumer? And what are any of your organizations doing to sort of drive that from the consumer level? Because that'll change the conversation when you walk in and you say, we have proof that people want to support equity brands. We have proof that things that are diversity or culturally sensitive are held at a higher standard or pushed out more.
Great question.
Well, what we're doing with Let'sReUp.com is we're doing just that. We're traveling from city to city. I call them the chocolate cities, where there's a large amount of black people in those cities, and we're encouraging them. So in order to do that, we're using, it's called Reg A Plus Tier 2. That's the ability to raise. In 2012, Obama created the Jobs Act. Prior to that time, you couldn't raise capital from individuals unless they were an accredited investor, $1 million net worth and $250,000 a year. So after that, that's available now. So we leverage that particular position and be able to, so that we can actually raise capital, as well as help people in that area to pool their resources. So I would ask you to go to the website and sign up, because that's a way for us to actually to pay our way in. I think it's a money thing, and so I think the greatest thing that different ethnic groups could be is ready. Instead of just asking, be ready, and where you can purchase.
I think for our organization, I think the point you made of educating the consumer about asking for brands that look like or feel like, or when you go in that dispensary or what have you, we could do a better job. And I will just be on the record saying that we could do a better job, because it's always been about working with working with those people in the community that want to get in the industry. Let me tell you, but you're absolutely 100% right. The consumer can drive what a manufacturer, what a retailer establishes if they go in and ask and say, I'm not going to buy because I don't see something or a product that looks like me or comes from me on the shelves. And so I think it's a great point, and it's something that I will personally look at how we can do a better job. So thanks.
And I'm definitely going to take something away, both at NCIA and MCBA. I definitely think there's a lot we can do to do more education campaigns to consumers so that they are supporting Black and Brown-owned businesses. I think that that's something that we sit in a unique position to be able to educate people on. So I do think that's a great idea, and that's something I'll definitely make sure we're doing.
It is something we've been looking at with Last Prisoner Project, as we've created, for our Sustained Donor Program, which we are in the midst of rolling out. It's called Partners for Freedom. Brand partners can come on board and to prove to their consumers that they do support projects like this to release prisoners, and they can put a stamp or sticker on their packaging. So, it's similar to the 1% for Freedom in a way, but, we're all working on it.
I would just add that, that is a really big opportunity for brands to do that educating themselves, right? Like if you're a brand that's looking to set yourselves apart from everyone else, if in your marketing you're doing that, that job of explaining why you're different than everyone else and why supporting you is supporting a larger movement, then I do think that that's also going to take us, that last mile for consumers to understand that they are participating or supporting brands that they, believe in.
Hello, everyone. My name is Sue Taylor, and I own ICANN Berkeley, a cannabis dispensary in the city of Berkeley. And I just want to begin by thanking each and every one of you for doing this panel, because it's forums like this that will get the word out and things begin to change. Because I've been in the industry now 10 to 12 years, and you've never seen anything like this going on. And when it was my son and my daughter-in-law and myself. When we started out 10 years ago to seek a cannabis permit, it's taken us 10 years. Because we were people of color, we had to do it right. Other people were doing it day and night. My black son got arrested. So we had to do it right, and we had to do it by the books. And so, but we got it. We weren't part of the equity program. And I think it began with us in Berkeley when we got that 5 years ago, because a few years later, then Oakland started it, the equity program. And so we're part of that, the pillars of it, of making it happen. And people can see us. But one of the things I want to say to each and every person in this room who are thinking about going to the cannabis industry is be mindful of why you're getting into it. If you're just coming in to make some money, go home. Because things are tough. It's not easy. If you don't have a love for the plant and what that plant can do, go home. Because times are hard. If you don't feel it in your heart about what this plant can do and do for people on the medically first, you said it right, young lady. Because the elders, the seniors in the United States, in 10 years, we'll be the largest demographic for the first time in the history of this country. That means they're working longer. We got to get them off the pharmaceutical approach to health care. We got to get those elders back, giving back to the younger communities, giving back to the young people. Mentorship, intergenerational, young people helping elders guiding with their wisdom. This plant, it's no accident that all of you, especially you, are up here doing this. It's no accident. You didn't choose it. It chose you.
Oh, yeah.
It chose me. I was a Catholic school principal, y'all. A Catholic school principal. If somebody told me I would have been doing this, talking about cannabis, I would say, oh, shit, they've been smoking too much. No way. It chose me. I walked for Harborside for 5 years. I saw what the plant did for people. Sick people. People who had stage 4 cancer, alive and well. But it wasn't people of color, they're scared of it. I helped to eliminate the stigma, especially for the people of color, because we're afraid. We're afraid our asses will be locked up in jail, so we don't go near it. Yep. So it'll take compassionate people like the ones in this room who cares about the plant and what that plant can do. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
I think that's a good place to end. Thank y'all.
You have time for one more?
Thank you guys so much.
Time for one more. My name is Michael Patton. I'm a verified equity applicant, San Francisco.
Awesome.
And, I'm here really looking for some assistance with incubation. You know,
So I would tell, I met a San Francisco equity applicant, and so I'll make it real quick. And I said, how things are going? And she said, I'm okay. I said, so how things are going? Well, I said, are you operational yet? She said, no. I said, if you're an equity applicant, you got to tell people where you are and what you need when you introduce yourself, and let people know. So because you never know who's going to ask you, what they have that resource for you to help you and support you. If you're not where you want to be yet, then put it out there, because if you would, there's people ready to help you and to support you. So I'm sure that we got to wrap up here, but definitely come see us. All right?
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thanks,
everybody. Appreciate it.